The title of the presentation today is Broadband for Everyone, a multi-technology mix. The thrust of my presentation is really talking about how we can deliver broadband as a service to every premise or every house within a network footprint, as opposed to just rolling a technology out and just giving it to 80% or 75% of that footprint and leaving the rest untouched. Trying to address a service for everyone and everyone who's concerned about getting a broadband service to their home.
CTO of NetComm Wireless. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Steve Collins. Tony Brown will be here in a few minutes' time. So today I'm talking about next generation broadband for all. What do you think when you first hear the term next generation broadband? Here at Broadband World Forum for many years, that term implies usually fibre to the home. Get glass into the premise. That's a future-proof solution. You can upgrade it. It's passive. It's in the ground. Great idea. There's actually nothing wrong with that idea. The problem is, how do you execute on it? The most important bit in the title of my speech today is the last three words: broadband for all, for everyone, for all houses, for all people in the footprint. And how do you get that technology through to every house in that footprint? I'm very happy that Tony Brown from NBN, an operator in Australia, will be coming to join me in a few minutes' time to talk about their experience doing exactly that. In Australia, we've been connecting the nation using the NBN network since 2009. And the goal was to put fibre in the ground, fibre to the home, as much as possible. That's the best access network technology you can get. Tony's going to come up and talk about how that hasn't quite been as per plan. There's been challenges along the way. There are geographical challenges, there's simple logistics challenges for getting the fibre into the ground. And so what's happened is technology has advanced, new solutions have come along, and NBN has worked with their technology vendors and their partners to come up with new and innovative ways of putting broadband through to each premise. And while that's going on, while everyone's waiting for the fibre to turn up in their home, consumers' attitudes have changed. People are no longer on the hamster wheel of looking for the next speed, the next technology wave that comes along. Think back 30 years ago when it was dial-up modems. There was a new technology wave every 12 months. And people would just run away and get the new technology and put it in. But nowadays, the attitudes have changed. It's not a luxury item anymore. It's not a new thing that you go and get and impress your mates. Broadband, it's a service. It's something that you expect to just work. And what do I mean by service? This graphic displays water, gas, electricity. These are services. These are utilities that you expect to have and just work. And it's really important to think about what that means. When you turn your electricity light switch on, the light comes on. You don't have a party. No one does a round of applause and says, "That's great, the light came on." It's just something you expect it to work. Light, switch on, light on. But when you turn the switch on and the light doesn't come on, panic ensues. Power's out, ring, complain. That's a utility, that is a service. And I put to you that broadband is at that stage now in the maturity of how it gets delivered through to end users and what end users think about that service. It's a minimum performance that matters now, not the up to speeds of up to a gigabit. That's not what really matters anymore. It's a minimum performance. It must be turned on and just work. Other services have been like that for years. Think about water. You turn the tap on, water comes out. You turn 3 taps on, water comes out. And if it's 7 o'clock at night, it doesn't slow down to a trickle, it still comes out. That's a service. Broadband is moving into that category. So if that's the way it is, if you agree with me, then for all is really important because a service is naturally available to everyone, like electricity, like gas, like water. And governments and regulators are starting to get involved with making sure that everyone gets their service. We had a talker here earlier today from the FCC who talked about closing that digital divide. everyone's starting to get involved with making sure everyone gets their broadband connection. Now, fibre to the home is a great way of delivering broadband, but it's very, very hard to make sure that goes into every home. And if we're going to roll out a broadband solution to everyone in a footprint or everyone in a country, then what we have to do is work together, device vendors like NetComm Wireless or network operators like NBN, who work together to solve those problem parts of your network, the bits where the fibre can't enter the home, the areas of the country where it isn't cost effective to put fibre into the home. This idea of fibre for everyone just because, well, it's not panning out. And I think during the keynotes we've heard in the last 2 days, that idea is actually being echoed by other speakers. I don't think I'm being very radical in this approach. So what I'd like to do is call to the stage the Executive Manager from NBN, the National Broadband Network in Australia, Tony Brown. Please welcome him to the stage. Thank you, Tony. Tony, thank you.
Thank you.
So can you please just tell us and the audience about the NBN just quickly and what your objective was back in 2009 when it was all started?
So in 2009, the original objective was to deliver fibre to the premises to 93% of the country, with the remaining 7% served by fixed wireless and by satellite. What happened was when the rubber hit the road in the real world, delivering fibre in a country like Australia to the premises proved much more difficult than people had really imagined. And there were two real issues there that slowed the rollout down significantly. The first was the nature of the premises in Australia. Until that point, really, fibre, outside Verizon, perhaps in the US, had really been deployed mainly in Asia in apartment buildings. And suddenly we're here trying to connect lots of premises in a largely suburban country. And as Steve would know, you only have to travel half hour outside one of our capital cities, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, half an hour outside those cap cities, and people are living on massive blocks of land, perhaps an acre of land with a driveway of 200 metres. And so what the company found was in the field, delivering this technology in a landscape like Australia was extremely hard. We had a change of government in 2013, and we had a change of technology direction to then start using the networks that were already in the ground, as JB Rousselet, our Chief Strategy Officer, said yesterday, and that meant to pivot to FTTN, using VDSL and HFC. And then on top of that, more recently, we just conducted with NetComm our first trials of fibre to the curb, or fibre to the distribution point, and that's what we're really excited about. Now, fibre, we get asked about this a lot back home. Why don't you just take fibre all the way to the premises? Why are you working with NetComm on fibre to the curb? Well, here's why. In the real world, in Australia, when you try and deliver fibre to the premises, you find out some pretty dramatic things. So, for example, there's an estate, I actually used to live on this estate outside Brisbane called Ridgewood Downs in Mount Cotton. 100 premises in the estate, all on about 1.5 acres each. To activate those 100 premises to FTTP took 6 months and cost an average of $8,000 per premise. The average driveway in that estate was about 150 metres. Now, in that estate, if we'd had fibre to the curb available then, and drop a DPU into the telecom pit, run VDSL or GFast, we'd have cut our costs by at least half, probably more. And so that's why, as Steve mentioned previously, it's really important not to be fixated on technology, but to look at an outcome. And if we can deliver the network at half the cost, but deliver the same speed, that's great for us and the end user.
Thanks, Tony. So from your point of view, some of these new technologies that come along, do they just come along and land in your lap and you pick them up and use them, or is it more of a collaborative approach that you have to use with your suppliers to bring that technology to market?
No, it's a collaboration for sure, and it takes time. This is what we know for sure, that we've had fibre to the curb. We've talked about fibre to the curb since about March 2015, and we get asked the whole time, when's it available? When are you launching this technology? And it takes time to work with our vendors like NetComm to make sure it works properly. The last thing we can afford to do is put a technology in the field that's not ready for the main stage. So it takes time and collaboration with the vendors to get things right. But what we've learned above all on the NBN deployment, when we're deploying broadband across this massive country, is there's one thing that struck us beyond any doubt is that you can't be fixated on using a particular technology. There are some places where a fiber to the node cabinet, a mains powered cabinet that can power like 384 premises will be perfect. Other places where a DPU serving 4, in the future maybe 8, 16 premises will be perfect. If you try and force a single technology solution on an environment that doesn't suit it, that's going to cause you big problems. Another example of that, in Australia we have quite an aging population, and so we have lots of retirement villages. And these retirement villages where people live in their later years, generally could be about 400 premises in there. Now we took our FTTP solution to these retirement villages and tried to run fibre to every premise. One of these villages in a place called Bentley in Western Australia, for P, was going to cost $1 million to connect the village to fibre, which would just be ridiculous and take an extraordinary long amount of time. So with 2 FTTN cabinets with a VDSL, we connect the whole village for about $300,000, which is still obviously a sizable investment, and we're in and out in 6 to 8 weeks. So that flexibility of taking the right solution to the right area, it's crucial.
So a lot of operators around the world, when I talk to them, they don't seem to have the same level of restriction around them, around delivering a service to their end users. It's sometimes more of a best efforts approach. What you get is what you get. Does NBN have any particular requirements or restrictions on what they have to deliver? Do they have a minimum performance they have to deliver to their customers?
We do. So as a wholesaler, we do have agreements in place with our retailers that our network will deliver certain speeds for certain periods of the day. So we do have those systems in place. But what we are finding, of course, is that now NBN being this very high-profile project, people are really taking notice of speeds. Now, as everyone in the room here knows, broadband, unless you're buying an enterprise-grade service, is always best effort. Now, because of the nature of the NBN, that conversation has now gone public on a national basis, and people phoning up radio phone-ins, talking to the media, going online and saying, look, I paid for 25 megs, I should get 25 megs the whole time. And that means now our competition regulators got involved with that and is producing a new approach to how the retailers need to deal with that. So when the NBN, without question, has been the most high-profile broadband project in the world. The first 3 days of the week, we've been the #1 item in the media. On Monday morning, as I said to a few people here at the conference, our Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, fielded questions just on NBN for 15 minutes. I mean, that's the level of the debate in Australia. It's extraordinary. And so it's a very high-profile subject, so things like speeds are becoming a really big issue.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, Tony Brown from NBN. Thank you, Tony. Thank you. So I wanted to just finish off this session just with some words about how we think technology can assist other operators who may be looking to do something similar to NBN, or may be thinking about, well, regulators are starting to put pressure on us and ask us for minimum speed performances. We've got the FCC this morning talking about the closing digital divide. The European Commission yesterday was talking about minimum speeds for all. So what does that mean? Well, firstly, let's take a little step back. Everyone talks about gigabit speeds. I just want to touch on that, because what is this gigabit speed? What is this super fast speed that everyone talks about every year at Broadband World Forum? Because I think a time has come for a change of language. Super fast, what does that mean? I looked it up. Super fast, Oxford Dictionary, it means extremely fast. It's a particularly unhelpful definition. They gave me a use case in the Oxford Dictionary. It said a super fast broadband connection. Thank you very much, Oxford Dictionary. So how fast does super fast mean? Because every year, super fast seems to be a little bit faster than last year. And the answer is it doesn't matter. The usual response from technology vendors like someone like NetComm, like ourselves, is to look at what are you going to use it for. So Netflix do this, and they say, well, you need a couple of meg for internet, you need 3 meg for standard def video, 5 meg for HD, and for 4K, 25 meg. So if you've got 3 or 4 screens, there's 100 megabits per second, that's what you need. Okay. That's interesting. It's a long way short of a gig, right? It actually doesn't matter. The speed doesn't matter. What matters is giving the user what they paid for. It's back to that utility idea. If they've paid for a certain level of service, that's what they should get all the time, no matter what. If they get more, job's great. So how do we do this? How do we change that thought pattern of delivering a new wave of technology every 12 months or 18 months and then getting very excited about that marketing release? Well, the answer is to think a little bit what NBN's already done. NBN's been asked to do this by the government. Other operators could choose to, or could wait till it happens for them. Make it a super fast broadband service as promised. Remove the unknowns out of the network, the things that you can't control, take control of them. You do that by putting more intelligence on the edge, more intelligence into the CPE. That may be a cloud service, it may be on the device, but there's intelligence there to run the device and provide the service. Last 2 points are very important. Tony talked about when they went to fibre to the curb, there was no off-the-shelf solution to match their problem. And I see that everywhere I go and every operator I talk to. They've got different challenges they're trying to face. They've got different pits, different geographical problems. So you have to take the technology building blocks that are available. I'm going to talk about ones that are available just in the next few minutes. Things like G-Fast, 5G. Take them, work out how to solve the problem, and augment that in with your fibre to the home service that you're doing for a large percentage of your footprint. That requires a very collaborative environment to make work. So some of the technology building blocks, just to touch on the technology piece, because this is a technology conference. Earlier this year, NetComm did a proof of concept with OpenReach BT for a world-first reverse-powered 212 profile G-Fast unit. And we are doing fibre to the curb units with NBN, and we have a very unique use case we're trying to solve. This unit you see here lives in a pit. It can sometimes be underwater. It's a very challenging environment. That is not something we think we're going to sell as is to another customer anywhere in the world. But the technology inside it, the reverse power, the G-Fast, the heat management, they are very useful building blocks that you can then customize and put into a product for different operators around the world. Fixed wireless. Everyone talks about fixed wireless. There's a whole track of fixed wireless here at the show. Today on 4G, you're looking at speeds of up to 100 megabits per second down, 40 up as a service. You can do faster than that, but as a general rule, that's using LTE Advanced. And moving forward, it might move into LTE Pro and 5G. These are speeds that can be done today via wireless, but it's very limited in how it scales out and how it could be rolled out to different parts of the community. Lastly, I'd like to finish on 5G, because there's a lot of hype about 5G out in the world. There's a lot of people thinking that 5G is going to come along and wipe over the top of existing technologies. And I'd just like to put some context around that, because we have a lot of experience in the fixed wireless use case for 4G. 5G is going to be a thing, but it's more complicated than that. It always is. Three of the main use cases which 3GPP is talking about are broadband, mission critical, and massive machine type. I'm just going to dive into each one a little bit and then bring it together. Enhanced mobile broadband is probably the one that everyone's interested here at Broadband World Forum. No massive surprise. There are a lot of features that 5G is bringing to the party to provide a better performance using a wireless technology. 5G can handle more devices on a cell. Massive MIMO allows targeted beams from the base station to pick out and provide better performance. It optimizes the base station. That helps you improve your peak load efficiency. If you look, though, at where you need spectrum to run mobile broadband, if you're talking about gigabit plus speeds, you need lots of channel bandwidth, and 4G channels just don't cut it. 4 carriers, 5 carriers at 20 megahertz, that's interesting. You can get to a gig if everything else is quiet, but to get a true broadband service to hundreds of users, not going to cut it. So you need more spectrum, and that's really happening in the millimeter wave band. That's where the channels are available and are clear. Problem with millimeter wave, propagation problems, and so the use case then comes down to smaller things like public places, train stations, sporting events, and maybe some line-of-sight connections from base station through to a house. And that's got challenges as well. You need outdoor devices, it might need a professional installation, it might not, but very small cells. So there's a lot of wrinkles to iron out there. That's one use case, very bandwidth-centric and used for broadband. Another one, which is completely different, is mission critical. For that, we're talking about things like vehicle-to-vehicle communication or machine control. It's all about having very low latency and high level of reliability. Dedicated infrastructure to provide a service. This is not a broadband solution. This is not going to have a broadband device. So how is this 5G? This is a different thing, isn't it? Well, no, because the network can do both, and there's people talking about technologies like network slicing that'll allow you to reconfigure the network in lots of different ways to provide a different use case. That's a little bit immature, it's got a ways to go. But the device that connects you through, it's very different. The broadband device I spoke about before, that's very different to a mission-critical device, which might be in a car or on a machine. Very different ecosystem. And then again, then there's massive machine type. This is the IoT field. Again, another whole field of devices and network configuration that has to be supported on 5G. Usually it's a different band, it's about coverage, it's about having very low price to allow scale. Why am I talking about all this? Well, all these different use cases have to somehow magically come together and be launched as 5G. So the answer for that is, it's not going to happen like that. Things are going to be introduced at different times. The broadband use case seems to be the most popular one at the moment. It's the one that Verizon's talking about. But the other ones are coming too. You're not going to have a killer device, like a killer app, like an iPhone that happened in 3G, 4G time. That's not going to come along and just do 5G. There's going to be different use cases at the device end and at the network end that have to come together. So lastly, when you look at the evolution of the standards, 3GPP, when you started with 2G, it started as a voice network with a data overlay of GPRS. Then we moved to 3G and we have data and voice kind of sitting side by side. 4G came along and it rationalized down to just a data network. Voice ran as an over-the-top service, or it fell back to 3G. It got nice and simple around 4G, and 4G was very successful, I think largely because of how elegant that was and easy to manage. But already it's starting to fragment. In 4G, it's falling out into Cat-M or narrowband IoT, and that's a separate use case. And 5G is just a continuing theme. It's fragmenting out into different devices, different network configurations, and the like. So, the takeaway from all of that, 5G has a way to go. It's definitely going to be a valuable technology. It's definitely going to be used, and there's a lot of money going into it. It's going to be successful. But it's not one thing. It's not one killer network that's going to come rolling in and be a challenge for fibre to the home or replace copper or fibre to the curb. It's going to be another augmentation that will solve particular use cases like the 3 that are here and maybe more that will come in the future. So I'd just like to finish up with what my 2 key takeaways are. 1, consumers, end users are changing on how they want their broadband service. It's no longer just about the new technology. It's give me a service that is reliable and has a minimum performance all the time. And regulators are encouraging that. And if you buy that argument, then that means everyone needs to have a service, and that means you need to have, as an operator, that service delivered to every person or every premise on that footprint. And fibre to the home, while it's a great idea, it can't be done to everyone. And so you need to look at these innovative technologies like 5G, like fibre to the curb, like fixed wireless, and tailor that into a complete solution that you can roll out through to every premise on your network.